You're watching BCTV. We're all about Branford. You're watching BCTV, Branford Government Television, a service of Branford Community Television. This program is brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Branford.
Town of Branford Board of Finance, regular meeting Monday, September 30th, 2024. First on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the August 26th, 2024 meeting.
I'll move it.
Moved by Jeff,
Second.
seconded by Harry. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Next on the agenda is citizens' communication. If anybody in the audience would like to comment on tonight's agenda items, they're welcome to do it at this time. Okay, next is item number 3, is to hear a presentation for fiscal 2023 audit by Clifton Larson Allen, LLP, our auditors. Welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. Again, I'm Vanessa Rosito. I'm a principal at Clifton Larson Allen, CLA. I'm here to present the results of the June 30th, 2023 audit. So just for the agenda tonight, I'll go over the terms of the engagement, executive summary of the results, some financial highlights of the financial statements. I'll go over highlights of the federal single audit, then the state single audit, the management letter, summarize the governance communication from CLA to the Board of Finance, and then lastly wrap up with just letting you know about some upcoming GASB pronouncements. So as far as of the terms of the engagement, we were hired to express opinions on whether the basic financial statements are presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. We express an in relation to opinion on the schedule of expenditures of federal awards and the schedule of expenditures of state financial assistance in the federal and the state single audit. We express an opinion on the compliance related to the programs that we test in the federal single audit and the state single audit. We provide a report on internal control over financial reporting and compliance with laws, regulations, contracts, and grants. And lastly, provide a report on internal control over compliance related to the major federal and state programs that we select for testing. So on slide 5, the summary results of the financial statement, we have issued a clean opinion, an unmodified opinion over the Town of Branford's 6/30/23 financial statements. This is the best opinion that you can receive. It means that everything is fairly stated in accordance with our accounting standards. We did have a finding on internal control related to the financial close, just because of the timing of the financial reporting close, because the audit was submitted late. And there is some comments in the management letter that I'll go over later related to that. As far as the federal single audit, we issued a clean opinion over all of the major federal programs that we tested. We did not have any compliance findings on those programs. We did have an internal control finding, which I will go over in more detail later. The state single audit, we issued a clean opinion on the major state programs that we selected for testing, and we did not have any compliance findings or significant deficiencies. On slide 7, just some high-level financial results. So this slide presents on a full accrual basis all of the funds of the town aggregated together. So the capital assets are brought onto this presentation, and also all of the long-term liabilities. So just comparing 2022 to 2023, the only item that really stands out to note, well, a couple things, is the increase in your long-term liabilities from about $131 million to $143 million. The major reason for that is because the net pension liability for the MERS plan, the state of Connecticut pension plan that you're in, did increase about $20 million. And then just net position from 2022 to 2023 increased from about 206 million to 219 million. So positive results from 22 to 23 on a full accrual basis. On slide 8 is presented the major funds of the town, the general fund, which is the major operating fund of the town, capital projects fund, the ARPA fund, and then in the fourth column is the non-major governmental funds column. These are the smaller funds of the town aggregated together. So just focusing on the bottom part, the results from 2022 to 2023, the general fund returned a little over $9 million to fund balance. Fund balance increased from $47.5 million to $56.6 million at June 30th, 23. Capital projects fund balance decreased about $1 million, but still has a healthy fund balance of about $19.3 million, and that is very common in a capital projects fund because there's more capital outlay than financing in this particular year. The ARPA fund is the ARPA grant that the town received from the federal government for the pandemic. So we recognize revenues to the extent of expenditures. So revenues equal expenditures of 2.183 million. So there is no fund balance in this fund. And then the non-major governmental funds column had an increase in fund balance of about $983,000. So overall, all of the governmental funds of the town fund balance increased about a little less than $9 million from 2022 to 2023. And then just some more highlights I thought you might be interested in on slide 9, talking about the general fund budget. Revenues came in $10.76 million greater than were budgeted in 23, and expenditures were $2.91 million under budget. The long-term liabilities, I talked about this earlier. Your net pension liability increased $20.4 million from 2022 to 2023. The town has 3 pension plans. There's 2 plans that are town-run, which is the police and the fire. There were small decreases to the net pension liability in both of those funds, $500,000 and $100,000 respectively. But then, as I mentioned before, the MERS plan, which is the state of Connecticut plan that the town is a participant in, the net pension liability increased $20 million. The town has a net OPEB asset. OPEB is the other post-employment benefits. So these are the retirement benefits that are paid, health insurance and so forth. So the town has a net OPEB asset, meaning that the assets set aside to fund this liability are greater than the liability. So that asset increased $6.6 million, and the asset is $13.8 million at June 30th, 2023. Moving on to the federal single audit, the town spent a little bit more than $7 million. We tested the ARPA grant, the Special Education Cluster at the Board of Education, and the Education Stabilization Fund, which is another pandemic grant, also at the Board of Education. We issued an unmodified opinion on compliance, as I mentioned before. We did have a finding over internal control over compliance, and this was a very common finding in a lot of my clients in June 30th, 2023. So the town is required to make sure that contractors are not suspended or debarred under these federal programs. None of the contractors were suspended or debarred, but the town did not have written procedures or procedures that they were following to make sure that this was happening. So we're just recommending that the town implement a procedure that when they are hiring a contractor under a federal grant to check the website to make sure they're not suspended or debarred. And then the state single audit, the town spent a little under $7 million. We tested 4 programs: tiered pilot, open choice, municipal grants and aid, and town aid road. Clean opinion on compliance and no internal control findings. And then we did issue a management letter, and I did allude to the fact that a couple of these comments have something to do with the reason that the town was late in issuing the audit for June 30th, 23. So the first comment has to do with the Board of Education bank reconciliations. So during our audit, we noted that the Board of Education's bank reconciliations were late. They had not been performed since December 2022. So it took time to reconcile these bank statements. So we are recommending that the town and the Board of Education work together to develop bank reconciliation procedures as well as a year-end close process to make sure that these bank reconciliations are performed on a monthly basis and timely. The other comment has to do with the tax collector. So the reports coming from the tax collector system did not reconcile to the general ledger. This took significant time for the finance department to spend to reconcile the activity. So we're recommending that the town review and strengthen the procedures within the tax department to make sure that there's sufficient time to reconcile. These procedures really should happen at the least quarterly, preferably monthly. And then we just have 2 other comments, which are best practices. We hear in the news every day there's some kind of cyber attack. So we're recommending that the town have an annual security and vulnerability risk assessment. And then sort of in that same line, the fraud, we're recommending that the town institute a formal whistleblower policy and have an anonymous fraud tip hotline. Because most of the fraud is found via an internal tip. So that's the management letter. And then as far as the auditor's communication, there are certain things that we're required to communicate to those charged with governance, which is the Board of Finance in this case. So I'm summarizing them on these 2 slides. The town did adopt a new accounting policy last year, GASB 96, which was subscription-based information technology arrangements. So these are software subscriptions where the town could be required to capitalize the contract and record a liability for the software. We did analyze, or management did analyze these arrangements and was really not material to the town, so there was no journal entry, if you will, made for these arrangements. The town will have to do this going forward every year, just like they'll have to do this for leases, which is the standard that we implemented in 2022. Every financial statements have estimates. So there's certain estimates that are large enough and deemed significant estimates. We have to look at these a little bit more closely to make sure there's no management bias, to make sure management's not trying to overstate or understate these estimates to kind of manage the results of the year. So in your case, the estimates are the useful lives of capital assets used to calculate accumulated depreciation, the net pension liability and the net OPEB asset. So these are calculated by an actuary based upon assumptions made by management. The allowance for doubtful accounts, which is based upon historical information on the collectability of your receivables. And then the claims incurred but not reported for medical, heart and hypertension, and workers' comp. So these are claims that are incurred during the fiscal year but not reported until subsequent to the year. So we looked at all of these estimates and found that they were reasonable with regard to the financial statements. We did not have any disagreements with management. Management did not consult with other accountants. As I mentioned before, the completion of the audit was delayed. We did not have any adjustments to what management provided to us. I mentioned before, we did have an uncorrected misstatement for the subscriptions, and we are independent of the town. We didn't have any independence issues. The next two slides are the upcoming GASB standards. So for this fiscal year, for June 30th, 2024, there's two standards. Statement 99, which is an omnibus. It's very minor changes, minor fixes to the financial statements, could have no effect on the financial statements. Statement 100 has to do with accounting changes and error corrections. So if there's an error in the financial statements and we have to correct them, it's just a different way of reporting it, or more guidance on how to report it. Accounting changes has to do with the major funds of the town. If a major fund becomes a non-major fund, or a non-major fund becomes a major fund, there's more guidance on how to report that, because previous to this, it was sort of silent. So it's just a little bit more transparency on what happened from last year to this year. I don't think that that's going to happen in '24. It might happen in '25, because the ARPA fund is eventually going to go down to zero, because the spending is going to be over. So that fund will change from a major fund to a non-major fund. And then in 2025, the GASB has issued statement 101 having to do with compensated absences. So the town will probably have to record an additional liability for some compensated absences that are due to be taken in the future but not necessarily paid. We'll have more guidance on that as we get closer to 2025. And then statement 102 is more disclosures around certain risks that the town could face, certain concentration risks. And then in 2026, the long-awaited Statement 103, which is the financial reporting model improvements. This, probably about 8 or 10 years ago, was supposed to be a very big standard, changing the way that the entire financial statement was supposed to look, but the GASB kind of rolled that back because they got a lot of pushback on it. So there's just a couple minor changes that you'll have for 2026. That's all I have. Any questions?
Okay, questions from the board? All set? I think we're all set, Vanessa.
Okay.
Much appreciated.
Okay, great. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Have a good night.
Okay. Item number 4 is to discuss ARPA and contingency appropriations, and if appropriate, consider the following transfer and resolutions. I'll read them. Resolved that the Board of Finance recommends to the RTM an increase in the ARPA fund budget from $7,710,500 to $8,185,500. This appropriation will be used to fund the grant to the Corcoran Sunquist Post 83 of the American Legion. This transfer appropriates the grants while also transferring funds to the fueling station project. Again, increasing a fund balance transfer of $475,000, and as far as the revenue side, and appropriating $425,000 for out to Municipal Facilities Fund and $50,000 out to American Post 83. And then within the general fund, two other, there's transfer from contingency of $275,000 for the fueling station. Again, transferring that out to the Municipal Facilities Fund. And with regards to the Municipal Facilities Fund, transfer reflects the changes in the fueling station's project revenue sources, reducing the bond authorization, replacing it with funds that are transferred pursuant to the previous transfer. moving $700,000 into the fund is essentially what it's doing. Jim, you gave us a letter on this. You want to expand?
Sure, thank you, Joe. So what we're trying to do here is address a couple things. The first was some of the previously identified needs. In one, you may recall that last Board of Finance meeting, you received a letter from Branford Interfaith Housing Corporation, and then you received a letter from Corcoran Sunquist Post, basically identifying capital needs that they had, but they were unable to effectively address because they weren't able to do fundraising. And so, so we're starting to wind down some of our ARPA appropriations, which is a common theme on both these items. And so when we were trying to come up with what would be a reasonable donation to the Post, reached out to the town of Madison, and they were just shy of $50,000 for both their VFW and American Legion. And so, and that's somewhat consistent with what some of our other smaller appropriations were for some of the other nonprofits. So, so the administration is putting forth $50,000 for that. And the other is, it's somewhat of a common theme, and that's to reduce future bonding authorizations. Some board members may recall when we did the $1.1 million for the fueling station, which is now operational, I think, as of last week, out in the back here. There was a lot of discussion over how we were financing that, because at $1.1 million, arguably it could be a large pay-as-you-go project, which means you're paying for it with current dollars or fund balance, or a small bonded project, which means that you would be borrowing for that. And so what this does is it does reduce the amount of bonds that we would necessarily have to authorize by $700,000. We're using, we will bond a small piece of it in October, which is next month, and starting tomorrow. And we're also looking to use some ARPA, and we're looking to use contingency dollars. And so, and again, that'll reduce the amount of borrowing that there could be. You may have noticed from the attachment that that still leaves a balance of $100,000. In talking with the town engineer's office, the belief is that the project will close with an unexpended balance of $100,000. Dates are important because the ARPA appropriations, our dollars have to be allocated by 12/31 of this year. So allocated either through a purchase order or a contract. And then they have to be spent by 2026. This $700,000, I'm sorry, this $425,000 that's going into it, these will be spent right away. So those ARPA funds will be spent right away. A little preview for a future meeting, we're probably going to try to close out some other ARPA projects and maybe reallocate some as well. The key is to try to do it in a way so that we're not giving money back. So, so again, this addresses one of the area nonprofits that identified a need. Branford Interfaith Housing is on hold for now. We'll see if we have to do anything next month. And we're reducing the amount of debt that we'd have to issue for the fueling station by $700,000.
Thanks, Jim. Questions from the board on this?
I'll move it, Joe.
You want to move those transfers? Motion's been made.
Second.
Seconded by Harry. Discussion? Questions? All set. Jamie, you're all set with this request? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Next, number 5 is to discuss appropriations for the fire department items and consider if appropriate the following transfer to hire additional EMTs in 2025 from the contingency fire, $517,000 to $623,000, going into Social Security, $19,147, retirement, municipal employees, $220,773, transfer out workers' comp, $57,383, health insurance, $220,320. In addition, there's additional, why don't we take these one at a time here? Jim?
Okay, so I'm going to go before the fire department, that's fine?
No, you'll take the, okay, that's
Yeah,
fine.
Yeah, no, that's fine, I'm ready.
Sorry, you're up.
All right.
You're chief talking tonight.
So during the fiscal '25 budget presentation, you approved the lump sum to go into contingency where it currently resides in our budget. Tonight, we're asking you to move the money from that contingency line to the right buckets. So the various line items, regular salary and wages, overtime, vacation, holiday pay, replace sick, and uniform and clothing. This is, we did finalize an MOU with the bargaining unit. We made some assumptions based on the replace sick account, which is what we usually do. We budget for about 8 because they essentially get 6 days contractually between personal days, and if they don't use any days, they get another day about every 4 months. So these are the numbers that we verified them based on our needs and what we had spoken about during the fiscal '25 budget year
Okay.
presentation.
Questions on this transfer?
So have we hired the 16?
We were in the
personnel?
process.
In the process.
Yeah. We figured we had to get this done before we actually hire.
Yeah, good idea.
We did have a robust application process, so we have some, we think, excellent candidates to choose from. So we're starting interviews Wednesday.
So you'll be able to fill all those positions?
We will.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions on this?
I'll move the transfer, Joe.
Okay.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next is the transfer for fire apparatus for $500,000 from contingency. Again, this is for fiscal '24 into the fire apparatus fund. Jim, what's the contingency balance in for '24 at this point?
Sure. The contingency balance, assuming all the items on tonight would be approved, would be $352,022.
Thanks. Okay, so,
Mr. Chairman, can we have a clarification on the motion
sure.
that just took place? Was that item 6 or was that item 5?
No, that's there's actually, that's the second part of 5.
Okay,
So it's really that 500,000. There's, within 5, there's actually three transfers. We're taking them separately,
okay.
because they're for different fiscal years, too.
So
So that's the 500,000 out of contingency and for the apparatus fund. Chief, update on the apparatus fund?
Yes, so as I've mentioned over the years, we're up against that wall where we had purchased back in beginning in 1997 through 2001 4 major pieces of fire apparatus. Those 2 of those apparatus are now approaching 28 years old. The others are right behind them. The useful life of a frontline, then these are all frontline pieces. There's no reserve pieces that we're talking about. And by frontline, I mean, yes, they are volunteer units, but those volunteer units are on the front line of our operations. So there's a couple of things going on. Obviously, post COVID, we've had a very big inflationary environment. I think the ARPA funds that you just mentioned and other government money has flooded our municipalities with cash that they started to spend. So all of that supply and demand stuff went up. Apparatus, we're looking at like 40% increases in cost. If you remember, in 2018, we purchased engine 5 down in Stony Creek. That was $535,000. That same engine today is $1.1 million. So there's the money end of it, and then there's the time frame. So we're also looking at delivery times that would have been a year from the time we signed a contract to up to 3 years or more now. So we're trying to get ahead of that, and you know, we do need to replace, for instance, engine 1, which is the frontline piece, has about right around 85,000 miles, if I remember correctly. So that's our, you know, newest piece that runs constantly. We're running into a lot of very high repair costs. The 1997s, we just replaced the transmission at almost $13,000. We're waiting to get the bill for the head gasket, and we need to keep these in service until we can get them replaced. So the other one that we had purchased isn't due, which is engine 1's replacement that I just mentioned. That's not due until next November. So what we'd like to do is get the order in for the apparatus that we had hoped to have funded during the presentation for fiscal 25. That number was cut, and the board asked us to come back when we had a number. So I'm back with the number, and it's the 500,000 that you cut from that. We have a we worked with our vendor. We went onto a national bidding platform, Sourcewell, and these numbers are all pretty consistent with what my fellow fire chiefs are seeing in the area. So we'd like to get that funded tonight, but at the suggestion of Director Finch, we also looked at the overall plan and thought it would be best to kind of look at it in the whole. And you know, the ladder truck's another one that you know, it's coming due. It wouldn't. I had it originally scheduled in the 27-28 timeframe, but again, you know, lead time's up to 3 years. If we don't get it in the queue now, you know, we're looking at both time frame and price increasing. Now, there could be some price increasing even if we order it based on the contractual language. You know, I want to be fully transparent that I believe it's item 10 in here, and I'll pass these out for you. Brian, you want to pass these out? So this is the whole contract, the whole truck, the whole thing. So if the producer price index, and this is on the second page of the contract, if the producer price index of components for manufacturing has increased at a compounded annual growth rate of 5% or more, between the month Pierce accepts the order and a month 14 months prior to the predicted ready for pickup, then the pricing may be updated in an amount equal to the increase in PPI over 5% for each year or fractional year between the month, et cetera, et cetera. You can read that, but I just wanted to be clear. There is a 7% price increase that'll take place in November, so we're trying to get ahead of that at least. But if we get it in the queue, we stand less of a chance of having that annual 7% increase that they have. It's been pretty consistent between 7 and 7.5% annually.
And that's what this 500,000 would fund?
Yes.
What's the?
Yeah, so we have a fund balance.
Yeah.
And between this and that, we would be able to make the purchase with a small carryover into the next fiscal year. And then I do have another engine scheduled for that. Again, trying to get ahead of this. One of the things that, you know, I mentioned before, we had the 4 major pieces of apparatus that we had funded. The heavy rescue was one of those. It was 1999. The volunteer rescue was very active. We've since kind of absorbed that more into the career side. We've allocated that equipment onto various pieces of equipment. We feel that the heavy rescue in that same vehicle would cost as much as almost as much as a pumper, so almost $1 million. We feel that because we reallocated a lot of that equipment to other pieces of apparatus, that we could get away with just a commercial box truck with a lift gate because most of the equipment we carry on that is very bulky, large equipment, and it just needs to get to the scene. It's not, one driver with a truck, get it to the scene. We don't need a crew cab. We don't need all the ancillary equipment. We're not going to run that as a company like we would an engine company or a truck company. So we put that into the fiscal 2025 timeframe as well. So this is just the updated plan. Again, it's just that, how we hope to proceed or wish to proceed is.
Question.
Sure, Harry.
On the 10th, that 5% PPI index, or whatever they want to call it, they're going to use. What's the time frame of that? It looks like it's from the time of our signing the contract, which is the base price
In the 14 months prior to the.
on the first page of the letter,
So it's,
that they could tap as 5% a month for 14 months.
annual growth rate, 5% or more between the month.
Probably like
We
a
accept it
$1.25, they could probably get into us.
in a
for.
month, 14
That's
months
what I
prior than the
calculated.
predicted delivery date, so.
Jim, any comment on that?
No, I don't know if I had the full contract. I think I had the, one of the
It's
other.
always the
sheets.
last page, right at the end, they tell you that, put the little thing in there. I calculated like
Page
about,
2.
to me, like $1.25 it could be up to if it really held to us. I'm thinking, I don't know.
So it's 5% a year, so it's not 5% a month, right?
No, not a month.
What's the PPI now at? What's our base?
It's fractional.
Yeah, I actually.
Okay. So,
You know what I'm trying to do.
so you're looking to enter into this
I'm just trying to
this
estimate
contract?
worst-case scenario.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
that's
no,
fair.
it's-
That's fair. You're looking to sign, to enter into this contract prior to the end of November?
Yes.
Okay. And now where does E1 show up on this replacement
Well,
plan?
so essentially, Joe, this engine's going to replace the current engine 9, which has been running as a volunteer. We're going to be staffing that truck with career staff. So the truck that we're hoping to purchase tonight would be that truck. The commission had voted after the purchase of engine 5 that moving forward, the volunteers would get engine 1 moved down. So we'd be essentially purchasing, engine 1 is currently ordered. We're not expecting it until November. The current engine 1 will start at engine 9 to replace that until the truck we're asking for tonight comes in about 3 years. And then eventually, what I have here as engine 2 would be,
Engine 3.
it would go to the busiest career engine, and then that engine would get handed down. So, we have 5 frontline engines right now. We've only replaced, currently engine 5 is the newest, is 2018. We have engine 1 on ordered for the current 2015, or the 2015, right? Engine 1. And these are replacing 2 1997s and a 2001.
So I have a question for clarification. So you purchased engine 5, which was in 2018. That's the latest purchase. We have a truck in the pipeline that we pre-funded. It's due next November. That's the new engine 1. This will be a new engine 1 3 years down the road.
It's actually going to be engine 9, Joe.
Right, okay, yeah, I follow you. It really
So,
came
because
in.
we're going to staff,
Right.
engine 1's our only career staff.
Correct.
We're going to be staffing 2 under this new
Right,
model.
right,
So
no, I understand that. I know we
that's what
approved
that's
that.
going to be.
So, I got just a lot of activity going on in your department, with some consolidations and stuff. What's happening to engine 4?
So,
That
under the new staffing model, the 3 uptown volunteer companies, 2s, 4s, and Indian Neck have combined. Eventually, Engine 2, the building, Engine 2, in the company, that building can't house a modern fire apparatus.
Correct.
So Station 4 can still do that. So our latest thought is eventually they're going to have to consolidate down into Short Beach, and Station 2 would be closed.
So those 2 engines can't go into that building, so one of those engines got to go away, is that correct?
Yes.
So we won't have to replace either 2s or 4s somewhere down the road?
Well, eventually we'd like to staff that eastern station too, Jeff, so
Well,
that's.
I understand there's a lot of big plans, but we're
But
also
that's-
talking a lot
that's
of
what
money
it-
that we're turning from paying cash into bonding.
Right.
And I'm not against what you're trying to do, I'm just trying to get a better understanding, because it seems like it's a lot of, chess pieces. I mean, what's Engine 7 do?
Engine 7's our current spare for Engine 1, so whenever Engine 1 goes down, Engine 7. The other, it's also, if Engine 1's committed, the current firefighters on the rescue or the ambulances, if
Take that
a
truck.
need comes in, they take that.
There's no more Engine 8, correct?
Engine 8's gone.
Engine 6 is gone.
Engine 6 is gone.
Right. And when we purchased 5, we sold that other truck off?
We did.
Okay.
And the plan is no longer will the volunteer companies get new apparatus.
And I agree
They're all
with that,
gonna- they're handy-downs.
break them in
Yep.
uptown
Yep.
and fund them, funnel
We
them
don't
down.
talk about, the new trucks we're buying are paramedic units too, though, remember? So that's a little,
So I guess-
around the cost of that too.
The biggest concern to me right now is that
Drugs.
the whole fleet is regularly going out for repair. Even Engine 1, which is one of the newer, we just had to replace a steering box on it. All of these are pretty expensive because they have to take everything apart to get to things, so it's ours.
And I understand you're doing your best to maintain them or whatever. Sometimes I have a hard time wrapping my head around what we do, and I know it's not a fair comparison. When I look at the city of New Haven, they're running trucks for a lot longer, and they
I
do
don't
more
think
calls.
that's true, though, Jeff. I just replaced a plow truck that has been in service since 1998, I think.
The Dodge?
The Dodge.
The white Dodge.
We're all of these trucks are 28
No,
years
I
old.
agree with you. I understand. Again, some of them, need to have a little bit longer life, especially when you're spending $1 million
Yeah.
plus. I'm looking at the ladder truck. I mean, at one point we had a platform truck, and then we went back to a stick. What's the future hold for that truck?
Well, I think
82 in town.
I think what the future will hold for that is, now, we don't follow the NFPA standards, it's not a law, right? But it is a national consensus standard, and the consensus standard for fire apparatus is 20 years as a front line piece for a fire engine. Ladder truck, about the same useful life, and then up to 25 years as a spare. We push that out. We're going to keep some of this stuff. They'll be 30 years old by the time we get rid of it.
And I understand that. You're
So
getting
the thought process with the ladder truck is that we're going to probably go back to a platform. There's a lot of practical reasons for that, one of which being staffing. And then, as long as the repair bill on the current ladder truck doesn't keep climbing, it would be a good spare. And again, having a spare ladder truck helps with our ISO rating. But again, by the time this gets in, whether we have a place to put it or not,
Right.
those
No,
things
and-
are all,
And I understand the restrictions that you're up against based on manufacturing. I see it in my own business and what's available at any given time. So again, I'm just trying to get a clearer picture, where we're going and how things are going to be funded and handled as we move down the road. So thank you for the interest in the questions.
So on this cover sheet here, the second column for 24-25, the $1.1 million for Engine 9 that's this contract.
that's that contract.
And
yes,
so
sir.
really, it's not necessarily an expenditure, but it's an allocation.
Right,
Okay, because you pay for when you get delivered.
right.
Okay. So, and then, but in 25-26, you're actually going to take delivery for Engine 1, the new Engine 1, right?
Yes, in
Next November,
Yep.
which is going to be in 25-26.
Yep.
where does that show up?
It doesn't, because it was I had it in that previous, so it would have been in fiscal '22 that doesn't show up on this drawing.
Because that's when we approved.
Yeah, no, I get it. So there's a difference here between, this is like an approval
Right.
versus cash flow.
Right.
Well, everything
So-
keeps moving, that's the yeah.
Right.
But if you lose sight of the money we already appropriated, it doesn't show up here. I think that's.
That's right,
That's what
that's
you're
right.
I know what you're saying, yeah.
So, and this 2,000,003 that's in the 24-25 column, is that just a dream, or what is that?
Well, that's just a dream, Joe.
Because that hasn't been requested.
No.
Okay. So, okay. It may be reality,
That's what we
right?
got, that's what we got bonded in next year.
That's what you're going to ask for, is what you're saying.
Well, those are the numbers that,
The numbers today.
because-
that we would need to make this work, right? So,
Right, but it shows that
you
it's
know,
in
when I
24-25.
first started this,
Right.
and I didn't want to be the one to be up against
Is this
coming up and
Finch
asking for
you're
4
getting
pieces of
involved in this?
apparatus one
Well,
after the other.
yeah, I guess I could plead some guilt to this. So basically, if we take a step back, there's a couple things at play here. One is that prices are escalating and lead times are increasing, right? So that's sort of what the environment is. Our funding model worked when lead times were short and prices were stable, okay? And so our sinking funds function much like, and I'll date myself when I say this, what a Christmas club would be. You know, you save up money for 11 months and then you get it on a 12th month and you go Christmas shopping. Well, now things are getting so expensive over the prior 11 months that we're almost doing what some in the banking industry would call a reverse Christmas club. You take out a loan in November and then you spend it the other 11 months paying it back. So when the chief was saying this to me, there was two things that came to mind. And one was the recollection that the board reduced the pay-as-you-go capital request by $500,000 at the time. And I think the thinking, and we've expressed this, was that we would go back and look and see where we are at the end of the year, and if possible, appropriate dollars from existing funds. So taking the $500,000 from contingency does that. It gives, so now there's a sufficient appropriation with the other $500,000 in the balance for him to enter into a contract with the pumper that he's talking about here. And then there's the issue of, you know, perhaps dream may be a little strong, but let's say aspirational in terms of what they're looking at for, you know, some of the future things, and then looking at, well, this would be very difficult to do on a pay-as-you-go basis. And so the thinking there is, well, what if we actually did a debt authorization, which does two things. One, it appropriates the dollars, and it gives us an authority to borrow. If we do that, then we can enter into a contract because the town has committed resources to that, either bonding, grants, or pay-as-you-go. In effect, we could still do elements of this plan by funding, to your point, Joe, the cash flow piece. And so that's kind of where the conversation started. And so the thinking was, well, all right, if you're looking to do something in November, we really need to get on the October Board of Finance meeting, so let's address the $500,000 piece, and then let's talk about some of the aspirational aspects of their fleet replacement, and at the same time, I would talk about, as I just did, some of the alternative ways to fund it and finance it.
So the chief's 2,000,003 refers to page 2 of your memo.
The concept, yes.
Yeah, the concept, okay.
Is that the ladder truck?
No, yeah, your ladder, the ladder truck.
So, and again, originally, we had that pushed out
Right.
year-wise, but
Right.
because of the
Because of
delivery
what's
times,
going
we
on.
moved it up.
Right.
We're not, we don't even have a spec ready for that
Right.
yet, you know, because we're kind of in the same boat, like, we weren't prepared to do this now, so.
Right. Well, conceptually, Jim's provides an you know, the ability for us to enter into a long-term contract and then decide at what point to either bond or pay cash for it. So it's.
Yeah, so I would have to come
which has
back with
been-
bond authorization.
Right, which has been utilized in the past. So maybe what might be helpful too is if we could get an up-to-date inventory of all of the vehicles, and then some of that will, maybe with notes as to, you know, what your timing is, and, you know, some of them are moved into
Yeah, I think
front line
I
and then,
could do a better job
Yeah.
of explaining that than a spreadsheet such as
Okay.
this.
okay. That's
It
fine.
is in the packet that I provide during the fiscal budget year, so
Gotcha.
I
So
did
it's in
update that, and I'll get that out to you.
Okay. Okay, in the meantime, we've got a request here for the $500,000 coming out of contingency and going into the fire apparatus fund. What's the pleasure of the?
I'll move it. I'll second it.
Been moved by Harry, seconded by Jeff. Additional discussion or questions? All in favor? Aye, okay, thank you on that. Next is additional funding to offset shortfall in the ambulance replacement fund for fiscal 2024, $15,000 from contingency and moving to the ambulance fund. Chief?
So, one of the ambulances that the most recent one we replaced is one that we remounted on we reused basically the patient compartment box. It saves us a good portion of the cost of a brand new ambulance. But during the removal of the old box, they found various things that needed to be addressed that they wouldn't have known until they removed it. A lot of it has to do with how the box is actually mounted on the new frame. So a lot of that support had been rusted out by our New England winters. So that's what caused the overage into that account.
Okay.
It is downstairs if you'd like to see it.
We trust you on this one. Questions from the chief or the commissioner?
I'll move it.
A second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And item number 6 is to consider and if appropriate, approve a request from the Board of Fire Commissioners for the following 2025 transfer from contingency, $1,320,481, transferring into regular salaries and wages, $959,009, overtime, $96,000, vacation, $96,768, holiday, $91,392, replacement 6, $64,512, uniforms and allowance, $12,800, for a total of $1,320,481. Chief, on this?
So this is that transfer from the contingency for the EMTs, broken down into the various line items.
Sure. Very good. And what's the start date on this?
Well, we hope to have them hired and begin training by November.
November 1st?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like the chief said, it was very robust, what we had for turnout.
How many applicants?
109.
Really?
And a good portion of them are current part-time employees.
Okay.
So
Wow.
There's a lot about the department.
Yeah, no, that's great.
How does this relate to the first transfer we talked about?
that is.
thing.
I think we just got off track in the agenda.
But Jeff, if you want to give us 16 more, we'll take it.
No, because the numbers don't add up.
We
if
can use
it's
32.
What, the
The
500?
517.
Well, the 517
That's
pays
different.
That's
the
the
other
benefit.
costs.
That's for Jim.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah,
really,
So currently the
presenting his
whole
budget piece.
the whole contingency from the approval of
I
the
got it.
earlier
I'm just
budget.
trying to,
Yeah.
don't want to give you any extra money.
No, I'm trying. Listen, I'm doing my best not to come before you.
Thank you.
so really, if you look at it, you put the two of them together, you got $1,837,000
Yeah.
for really what the new employees are going to cost us for the, 7 months.
$1,830,000, yeah.
Yep.
Is that ties back to the estimates?
Yeah, it's basically it's for a year, even though they're going to be hired for 7 months, and then when we look at our budgets year to year, it'll line up.
Okay, so these are all annual
Correct.
costs?
Yes.
Okay. So if they're annual costs, then there'll be something at the end left over.
Yes.
Okay.
We're going to give you money back.
Yeah, no, money's going to come back.
That's pretty tricky.
Yeah, right?
Money's
We're
going to
going to look
come.
good.
Yeah, money's going to come back in his budget, and money's going to come back on, I'd say my budget, but it's not, but the benefit accounts. I mean, money was going to come back regardless, so,
Right.
yeah.
Okay. Questions on this $1,320,000?
I'll move it.
Moved it,
I'll second.
seconded by Deborah. Discussion? All in favor? Aye. All right, good
Just
luck.
want to say I appreciate
Congratulations.
everybody's.
We always do, thank you.
Everybody's time.
Everybody.
This is really kind of an important and historic move for us to move into this new model, and, we couldn't have done it without everybody, and we're looking forward to it. It's going to be a vast improvement in our ability to serve the community, so I thank you for that.
Yes, Chief.
Chief,
Yeah, you won't have as big of a
Chief,
gap in the reval year.
We'll see you in March.
who's left to manufacture fire, the fire
There
trucks?
are several manufacturers,
stuff out
but
there,
we're
Pierce.
trying to
Got anything else, though?
keep things a little bit consistent for parts-wise and whatnot,
Yeah.
and, we're not buying the Cadillac, but we're not buying the, the
Okay.
Okay.
Almac.
So this is Pierce? Is this a Pierce truck?
This is a Pierce.
Yeah, Pierce, yeah.
Pierce truck.
Good
So
truck.
who's this group that oversees it?
They're
Is
just
that,
the dealer.
they're the
That's-
dealer?
yeah.
Okay,
They're
and
the
Pierce
dealer,
is the
yeah.
manufacturer?
Yeah.
Okay,
Give you like a
I'm
McDermott for
just
Chevy.
interested in how
Right.
many manufacturers are left in.
right.
Yep.
And Jim, you had a comment?
I was going to say, the other thing is, the money will come back, but, by budgeting the 12 months, you have less of a gap next year with the reval year, because we would have already taxed for 12
Got
months.
it. Okay. Thank you.
But Joe, we're gonna promise you money back, though.
Yeah, okay. All right,
right,
folks,
thank you.
thank you.
Good night,
Here.
everyone. Thank you.
Okay, item number 7 is to consider and if appropriate, approve the following funding request pursuant to the Recreation Department's required repairs of Veterans Memorial Park and Foot Memorial Park repairs from contingency $70,000, transferring out to capital projects $70,000, and within Fund 700, transfer into $70,000, increase capital outlay improvements for $70,000. Alex, welcome back.
Thank you, Joe. Good evening, everyone. You did get a letter by Jim Finch last week, as well as mine at the end of last week, defining a scope for this transfer. One of the biggest problems that we've had down at Foot Park and both Veterans Park, Foot Park is approaching 53 years old. Veterans Park, 43 years old. And even though we have a couple programs to increase and fix the tennis court lighting at both facilities through some grant programs, we were unable to, we knew down the road that at some point we might be having to replace a lot of the wiring that has kind of gone the different directions, no good anymore. And one of the biggest reasons is most of the wiring done back in the day were not done in conduit. It was direct burial. And I do define in my letter, if there's any questions on the scope of each project, but the biggest problem is we have to go from pole to pole. We have to go under some concrete sidewalks. We also have to go under some asphalt. We also have to trench some ground. So we have to go pole to pole to get these repairs more prevalent up, if you look at the scope at Veterans Park as opposed to Foot Park. So we're going to be running conduit and wiring through these areas to get the lights up to code. I did work also with the building inspector and also our electrical inspector on this. So we're looking forward to try to get these lights working on the tennis courts. Specifically, this is our busiest time of the year. They were working until like a couple weeks ago. So we're really moving forward to try to make sure that everything is grounded correctly and that we're able to get these lights back up and running at both parks.
So there's no conduit at Foot Park?
There's no conduit going to what we need to run it through. It's all direct burial from years ago. And we kind of knew about that, but thought that, it wasn't going to be a problem, but it ended up being that way. And we also, back in the time, we had up at Veterans Park, there's some conduit that comes underneath the sidewalk but doesn't go out to the poles. And all that wire is either we're going to get rid of the wire or replace it all the way through.
Okay. Questions? Somebody want to move it?
I move it.
Moved by Jeff,
Second.
second by Harry. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is this your last visit with us? You going again?
Jim told me the last month or 2 months ago that it probably wouldn't be, and he was correct. So I'm not going to say it is my last meeting. We'll
Okay.
see, I guess.
Good
Time will
seeing
tell.
you.
Hopefully not. I like to see you, but hopefully not.
Thanks, Alex. Jim, this other piece of it that's kind of on this agenda item is the 18503 Energy Conservation Project. Do you wanna-
Yes, and that was the project which was sometimes referred to as the Honeywell project. It was done back in 2018. We did a number of energy conservation measures. Many of them were done at the schools, some were done at the town, and we had amended that to do, a lighting project basically back only a few years back, and that's when the Branford football field was relighted. And then there was money to do the tennis courts at Vets. I believe that the new lights are in, but then there's issues with the, as Alex pointed out, with the conduit. So to make this cleaner, the recommendation is to basically close out that old project, the 18503. Approximately 50,000 is going to come back to the general fund, and now you're transferring money basically to create a project in the 24 capital projects fund of 70,000 to do what Alex has outlined, and the closing out of 18503 will occur in fiscal 25, and like I said, approximately 50,000 will come back to the general fund.
Okay, so that resolution is resolved that the Board of Finance recommends to the RTM that Project 18503 Energy Conservation be closed out, and that all surplus funds remaining and the project will be returned to the general fund.
I move it.
Moved by Jeff,
I'll second.
seconded by Deborah. Jim, clarification, part of that presentation, I believe, was that there would be some type of monitoring on that for savings. How does that, do we get reports on that, or how does that play out?
Yeah, basically, the energy conservation and measurement focus was for 3 years after it was installed, and we did get reports from Honeywell and also verified by, well, it's called Energia now, but I believe the company was called ECG prior to that.
Okay.
So there has been, they did verify the savings.
Thank you.
So,
All
and
in
we
fa-
also got grants from the utility companies as well, so
Right.
they wouldn't give us the money if they weren't seeing.
Incentivized, right.
Yeah.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, item number 8 is to consider and if appropriate, approve the following transfer from the finance director as follows: from contingency, $5,984 into overtime, $5,984. Jim has provided a letter explaining that. Jim, you got any other comments on that?
No, and basically, this transfer is really kind of consistent with the material you had in reviewing the audit, in which, the finance department spent, time, Catherine specifically, with the tax office and the Board of Education. The Board of Education did reimburse us for Catherine's time. That came in as a revenue. The other thing is, it's important to remember, is that Catherine's position can earn compensatory time off. So in other words, you work overtime, you take time off, or if it's unable to be used, then it gets paid out. And so, given the time, it didn't make sense for her basically to take time off, because she'd be, for example, if she was working at the schools and then takes time off away from the finance department, you could see where that doesn't really work for us in terms of what our workload is. So thankfully, the contract also has language that says, you could also get paid out.
Got it. Questions? Somebody moved by Jeff,
I'll second.
seconded by Pam. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Again, thanks, Catherine, for all the work that you're doing to help out on things. Much appreciated. A voice from the wilderness. Item number 9 is to consider a request from the Assistant Finance Director to implement a purchasing card program for the town and Board of Ed through Bank of America, and to approve the following resolutions. And I'll read those. Resolved that the Board of Finance authorizes the Finance Director to enter into an agreement with Bank of America to provide P-card services to the town of Branford with a maximum spending limit of $90,000. This program will be administered by the Finance Department, and the complementary resolution is resolved that the Board of Finance authorizes the Chief Operating Officer of the Board of Ed to enter into an agreement with the Bank of America to provide a P-card services to the Branford Board of Education with a maximum spending limit of $50,000. This program will be administered by the Board of Ed Finance Department. Jim, I'm sorry, Catherine, this is yours.
This is mine. Back in 2006, this board approved a resolution allowing the town to enter into an agreement or to apply for credit cards for specific positions. Over the years, we've come back to the board, whether it's increasing positions or increasing limits on certain credit cards. There was a temporary authorization during COVID for members of our office. We were notified, I'm going to say a couple months ago, by Bank of America that they were getting away from that. They were moving people, all municipalities, to purchasing cards. So we reached out to several banks to do due diligence to see if they could find another banking institution that would do a credit card as opposed to a P-card program. The major difference between the P-card and the credit card is that the credit card is person-specific as well as limit-specific. The purchasing card is town or Board of Education in this case. They give you a maximum aggregate spending limit, and then the town finance department and the Board of Education finance department would manage who gets cards and what those limits are, as long as it doesn't go over that aggregate limit. The reason I have included the Board of Education, I thought it was easier to do one letter. However, if you do have questions for the Board of Education, the Chief Financial Officer, Blaze, is here if you want to ask him any questions. But we're looking to literally manage it as if it's a credit card. It's just that it's the P-card program.
Okay. Questions from the board?
You said a certain amount of employees, is it certain employees that are gonna get
It's,
it, or?
we did positions. We originally, when we got the approval, was person-specific as well as position-specific. But then I had to come back as people were retiring, leaving the employment. So now it is position-specific. But if this is approved, it would be up to the finance department to decide what positions have what limits per credit card. So, you know, we might take our current purchasing clerk has a $10,000 limit. We find that sometimes it is, she's using the card so often, we might have to increase it to 15. But that type of management is done on a finance level, as opposed to having to come back and go to the Board of Finance as well as the bank to make those changes.
Sure. How many cards do we have on the town side?
Currently, we have 7 cards. One was a temporary card issued to Jim during COVID. So I'm going to say 6 that are regularly used.
Active. So
Exactly. And we do have procedures in place. You know, we still get approvals ahead of time unless it's an emergency.
Okay.
It's really for ease sake. There's so many things that have to be done online now. You know, cost efficiency. Ordering something
Sure.
from, you know, Amazon is a lot cheaper than, you know, if you have to go through Dell directly sometimes.
Right, sure. Okay, and Blaze is here, the COO of the Board of Ed. How many cards do you have now?
We have one card
Oh,
right
one
now.
card.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's very limited. Superintendent, we plan on the P card system to keep it very similar to our current structure with very few, but it is, as Catherine mentioned, it'll be slightly easier, so we'll probably split in the new model and have 3, 1 for the central office, 1 for the technology department, and 1 for a program that's at the high school. And that'll be it.
They'd be managed by you?
It'll be managed by our office, yeah. We'll end up having, we have fairly tight controls. We're a little over. This limit is over on our current kind of even near threshold on how we use it, but it's since we have such better controls through the finance office on this instead of a credit card, we can really kind of control it a lot easier, so a little more comfortable having a credit limit at a higher dollar amount.
Okay, thank you. Okay, questions? Somebody want to move these items?
I'll move it.
Moved by Jeff,
I'll second.
seconded by Deborah. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you, and Blaise, good luck on the audit recommendations as well.
Thank you.
Okay.
We are quite on it, and it really is a huge thank you on the partnership with the town. Catherine, as you know, has been a huge help on many projects, and Jim too, and we're working really closely together, and it's making things run really great. So it's a huge thanks.
All right, good to hear. Thank you. Okay, item number 10 is to consider and if appropriate approve a transfer request from the town clerk for 2024 legislative budget from legislative update law ordinances, $600, and from advertising and printing, $570, transferring into legislative advertising for $1170. Lisa?
Thank you. So the budget for FY '24 was $3,800. The overage is due mostly to the fact I provided a spreadsheet of the actual expenses with my memo. There were 6 occurrences where the agenda had to be published in the New Haven Register as opposed to the Sound. You'll see the comparison in the difference in the advertising costs. Some were due to the fact that we couldn't meet the advertising deadline of the Sound based on how the calendar fell. Others were, and Marianne is here, she could back me up on this. Others were due to the fact that we were transitioning a new RTM and they were learning the process of getting the agenda ready. So that came into play as well. We also had several new RTM representatives that we ordered nameplates for. The nameplates were $238, and because this encompasses advertising as well as printing, those plates went under that account as well. So the gracious town clerk that I am, I'm giving an overage from the town clerk budget for advertising of $570 to offset this overage, as well as from update law ordinances, which is a line item in the legislative budget.
Thank you. Questions on this?
I'll move it.
Moved by Harry,
Second.
second by Jeff. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All
Thank
right.
you.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. With no other business to come before the board, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion's been made,
I second.
seconded. All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
This program was brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Branford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at BranfordTV.org.